Can you pretend to be my husband for an hour? The bullied obese girl, begging the mountain man. The Last Chance Saloon lived up to its name. It was the final establishment before the Arizona desert swallowed the road whole. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the sour smell of cheap whiskey. Clara pushed through the bat-wing doors, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Every eye in the place turned to stare at her, and she heard the familiar chorus of snickers and muttered comments that had followed her since childhood. At 17, Clara had learned to move through the world as if she were perpetually apologizing for occupying space. Her substantial frame, what the town cruelly called severely obese, made her a target for mockery wherever she went. The saloon was no exception. A drunk at the bar made an exaggerated oinking sound, and his companions erupted in laughter. But Clara hadn't come here for them. She scanned the room until she found him. Jed sat alone at a corner table, his back to the wall in the way of men who had survived by staying alert. He was impossible to miss, easily the largest man in the room, not from fat, but from sheer muscular bulk. His shoulders strained against a worn work shirt, and his forearms, visible where his sleeves were rolled up, looked like they could bend iron bars. Dark hair fell past his collar, and a beard covered the lower half of his face, but his eyes, pale gray and watchful, missed nothing. Everyone in the territory knew about Jed. He was a frontiersman, a scout, a man who lived alone in the mountains and came to town only for supplies. There were stories about him, that he'd killed a grizzly with just a knife, that he'd survived an Apache ambush that left 12 soldiers dead, that he could track a whisper across solid rock. People gave him a wide berth, uncertain whether to fear or respect him. Clara forced her feet to move. Each step across the saloon floor felt like walking through mud, and she was acutely aware of how the floorboards creaked under her weight. The laughter grew louder. Someone threw a peanut shell that bounced off her shoulder. She kept walking. When she reached Jed's table, he looked up at her with those pale eyes, his expression completely neutral. Up close, Clara could see the scars on his hands and the weathered lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into harsh sun. "Mr. Jed?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. Just Jed. His voice was deep, quiet, with a western drawl softened by time spent in silence. "What do you want?" Clara glanced around. Every person in the saloon was watching, waiting for the entertainment to continue. She swallowed hard and leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I need to speak with you privately. It's urgent." Jed studied her for a long moment, then gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit." Clara sat, grateful to take the weight off her feet. Jed pushed his untouched whiskey glass aside and gave her his full attention. There was something in his gaze, not pity, not disgust, just a calm patience that made her feel, for the first time in years, like she might actually be seen as a person. "I need your help," Clara began, then stopped, unsure how to phrase what she was about to ask. "I need you to, that is, I was hoping you might consider—" She took a breath and forced the words out in a rush. "I need you to pretend to be my husband for 1 hour, maybe less, just long enough to attend a will reading." Jed's expression didn't change. "Explain." So Clara did. The story poured out of her, how her father, a prospector named Samuel Whitmore, had died 3 months ago, how he'd left her his gold mine, the Lucky Catherine, which had finally started producing after years of empty shafts and false hopes. How the will stipulated she must be married by her 18th birthday, just 3 days away, in order to inherit, and how her Uncle Silas, her father's younger brother, was contesting the will, claiming that Clara was incompetent due to her condition and her youth. "Uncle Silas is saying I'm too fat to manage the mine," Clara said, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "He's been telling everyone in town that I'm mentally deficient because of my size, that my father only left me the mine out of misguided pity. He's got half the town council believing him. Tomorrow at noon, the territorial judge is reading the will officially. If I show up unmarried, Silas gets everything." Jed listened without interrupting, his fingers drumming once on the table, his only visible reaction. When Clara finished, he leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "Why me?" he asked. Clara had anticipated this question. "Because you're the only man in the territory who doesn't mock me. You don't even look at me, you just exist. And because Uncle Silas is afraid of you. Everyone is. If I walk in there with you as my husband, he won't dare challenge it openly. He'll challenge it afterward, get the marriage annulled or investigated." "I know, but my father was smart. He put clauses in the will. If I'm married when the judge reads it, the mine becomes mine outright. No conditions, no reversals. Once it's mine, Silas can't touch it." Clara leaned forward desperately. "I just need 1 hour. 1 hour where you stand beside me and let people believe we're married. I'll pay you half the mine's first-year profits. That's over $5,000 based on current yield." Jed was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the saloon had returned to its normal noise level, though Clara could still feel eyes on her back. "You got a marriage certificate?" Jed finally asked. Clara pulled a folded document from her bag. "My father's lawyer helped me. It's backdated to last month. Technically illegal, but the lawyer says as long as both parties claim the marriage is real, no one can prove otherwise without a lengthy investigation, which would take longer than tomorrow's reading." Jed took the document and examined it. His reading was slow but thorough. "This says, I married you in a ceremony performed by Reverend Walsh. The Reverend is sympathetic to my situation. He's agreed to confirm the ceremony if asked." "You've thought this through?" "I've had 3 months and nothing else to think about." Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "I know it's asking a lot. I know I have no right. But you're my only hope. Every other man in this territory either wants to marry me themselves to get the mine, or they've already thrown in with Uncle Silas. You're the only person who doesn't have a stake in this. Please." Jed set the document down and looked at Clara with those pale, unreadable eyes. Then he stood, his full height, imposing, in the low-ceilinged saloon. "Be at the courthouse at 11:30 tomorrow morning. Wear something that looks like a wife would wear. I'll be your husband for an hour." Relief flooded through Clara so powerfully she thought she might faint. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise I'll—" "Don't promise anything yet." Jed pulled on his hat. "We'll see how tomorrow goes." He walked out of the saloon without looking back, and Clara sat there, scarcely able to believe what had just happened. Then she heard the whispers starting, saw the speculative looks. By morning, everyone in town would know that Clara Whitmore had approached the mountain man. But she didn't care. She had a chance now, a real chance. The next morning, Clara dressed in the best clothes she owned, a dark blue dress her mother had made before she died, altered multiple times as Clara grew. It fit poorly across her shoulders and strained at the seams, but it was respectable. She pinned her hair up carefully and even applied a touch of rouge to her cheeks, though her hand shook so badly she had to wipe it off and start over. At 11:30, she climbed the courthouse steps and found Jed waiting. He had cleaned up. His beard was trimmed, his hair pulled back, and he wore a dark suit that must have been specially tailored because there was no way any standard size would fit his frame. He looked almost civilized, except for the Colt revolver holstered at his hip and the knife sheath visible at his boot. "You clean up nice," Clara said nervously. "So do you." Jed offered his arm. "Ready?" Clara took his arm, feeling the hard muscle beneath the fabric. Together they walked into the courthouse. The main room was packed. Clara's Uncle Silas stood near the front with his lawyer, a weaselly man named Pickens. Half the town had shown up for the spectacle. When Clara and Jed entered together, a ripple of shock ran through the crowd. Uncle Silas turned, and his face went from smug to furious in an instant. "What is this?" "This is my husband," Clara said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Jed Whitmore. We were married last month." "That's a lie," Silas sputtered. "This is a fraud. Your Honor, I demand—" "You'll wait your turn, Mr. Whitmore." Judge Harrison, a stern man in his 60s, sat behind the bench looking thoroughly annoyed. "Miss Whitmore, pardon me, Mrs. Whitmore, do you have documentation of this marriage?" Clara handed over the certificate. The judge examined it carefully, then looked at Jed. "Mr. Whitmore, you claim this marriage is legitimate?" "I do." Jed's voice was calm, but there was something in it that suggested contradicting him would be unwise. "And Reverend Walsh performed the ceremony?" "He did." Judge Harrison nodded slowly. "I'll want to speak with the Reverend to confirm, but assuming he corroborates your story, this appears to be in order." He turned his attention to the will. The last will and testament of Samuel Whitmore is quite clear. Upon his death, his sole asset, the Lucky Catherine gold mine, and all associated claims, equipment, and proceeds, passes to his daughter Clara, provided she is married before her 18th birthday. Since Mrs. Whitmore is currently 17 and presents as married, the condition is satisfied. "Your Honor," Silas stepped forward, "I'm contesting this will on the grounds that my niece is mentally incompetent. Her condition makes her unfit to manage a mining operation." "Her condition?" Judge Harrison's eyebrows rose. "Please elaborate, Mr. Whitmore." Silas seemed to realize he'd stepped into dangerous territory. She's very young, and her physical state suggests a lack of self-control that— "Are you suggesting that Mrs. Whitmore's weight makes her mentally incompetent?" The judge's tone could have frozen lava. "I'm suggesting she doesn't have the capability." "Then you're wrong." Jed's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. He hadn't raised his volume, but something in his tone made everyone go silent. "My wife is competent. She handles the mine's books, manages the workers, and makes decisions that have increased yields by 30% in the last month alone. Any man who thinks her size reflects her intelligence is a fool who deserves to lose his claim." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Clara stared at Jed in shock. He had just defended her with a passion that went beyond their arrangement, and he'd claimed they'd been working together for a month, giving their fake marriage credibility. Uncle Silas's face turned purple. This is ridiculous. They're lying about everything. I demand an investigation." "An investigation into what?" Judge Harrison looked genuinely curious. "Into whether Mrs. Whitmore is married? We have a certificate, signed by a recognized clergyman with 2 witnesses. Into whether she's competent? Her husband just testified to her capabilities, and I see no evidence to the contrary. Or are you perhaps investigating whether you can steal your brother's mind from his only child?" "I'm not trying to steal." Samuel Whitmore anticipated this exact scenario. The judge pulled another document from the file. "There's a codicil here, added 6 months before his death. It states, and I quote, 'Should my brother Silas contest this will on any grounds related to my daughter's physical appearance or her youth, he is to receive nothing from my estate and is barred from any future claims.' It also states that if Clara is married at the time of the reading, her inheritance is absolute and cannot be challenged through annulment or investigation of the marriage's validity." The courtroom went silent. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Her father had known. He'd known Silas would try this, and he'd protected her even from beyond the grave. Judge Harrison set down the documents. "The will is clear and legal. The Lucky Catherine mine and all associated assets now belong to Clara Whitmore and her husband, Jed Whitmore, to be held jointly as community property. This court finds no grounds for contest. Case dismissed." His gavel came down with a crack that seemed to echo in the stunned silence. Uncle Silas stood frozen, his mouth working, but no sound coming out. His lawyer was already gathering papers, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Around them, the townspeople began to whisper and speculate. Jed took Clara's arm. "Let's go." They walked out of the courthouse together, and the moment they cleared the doors, Clara's legs gave out. Jed caught her smoothly, taking her weight as if it were nothing, and helped her to a bench under the nearby tree. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Just breathe." Clara did, gulping air, her whole body shaking with the adrenaline crash. "We did it! Oh, God, we actually did it!" "Your father did it. He set everything up perfectly." Jed sat beside her, the bench creaking under his weight. "He must have loved you very much." "He did." Clara wiped her eyes. "I just wish he'd lived long enough to see Silas's face when that codicil was read." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, letting the chaos of the courthouse fade behind them. Finally, Clara turned to Jed. "Thank you. I know we agreed on payment, but I can't—" "Keep your money." Jed cut her off. "I don't need it." "But we had a deal." "We did, and I'm changing the terms." Jed looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. "I've been living alone in the mountains for 8 years. It's a hard life, and I'm tired of it. You need someone to help run the mine, someone Silas and the other vultures will hesitate to challenge. I need a reason to rejoin civilization and a place to belong." He paused. "I'm proposing we make this marriage real. Not in the romantic sense, at least not right away, but as a real partnership. We run the mine together, split the profits equally, and present a united front. You get protection and help. I get purpose and a home. What do you say?" Clara stared at him, trying to process this unexpected offer. "You want to actually stay married to me?" "I want a partner I can trust, someone who won't betray me for money or status. You asked me for help when you had nothing to offer but hope and honesty. That tells me something about your character." Jed's expression softened slightly. "And for what it's worth, I don't give a damn about your size. I care about whether you're trustworthy and capable. From what I've seen, you're both." Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something she'd thought died years ago when the mockery started. Hope. Real hope. "Okay," she said. "Yes, let's be partners." Jed extended his hand, and they shook on it, a firm, businesslike grip that nevertheless felt like the beginning of something important. The Lucky Catherine mine was a 30-minute ride from town, up a winding trail into the foothills. The main shaft had been expanded and reinforced, and there was a small cabin nearby, where Samuel had lived during his prospecting years. Jed surveyed the operation with a practiced eye, while Clara showed him around. "Your father knew what he was doing," Jed observed, examining the timber supports in the main tunnel. "This is good work, safe work. He spent 20 years learning his trade." Clara ran her hand along the rough wood. "Everyone thought he was crazy, chasing gold and worked over hills, but he believed the main veins went deeper than anyone had dug before. Turns out he was right." Over the next weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Jed's experience with engineering and construction proved invaluable. He reinforced weak sections of the mine, improved the ventilation system, and designed better equipment for extracting ore. Clara managed the business side, keeping meticulous books, negotiating with buyers, and handling the payroll for the small crew of workers they hired. At first, the workers were skeptical of taking orders from a woman, especially one of Clara's size. But Jed's presence and his willingness to enforce Clara's authority with extreme prejudice if necessary quickly established the hierarchy. When one worker made a crude comment about Clara's weight, Jed fired him on the spot and personally escorted him off the property. After that, there were no more comments. They lived in the cabin together, but Jed had immediately set up a partition down the middle, giving them each private space. He was scrupulously respectful, never entering her side without permission, always knocking. At first, Clara appreciated the privacy, but as weeks turned into months, she found herself wishing the partition wasn't there. She was falling in love with him. It happened gradually, in small moments, the way Jed would brew coffee in the morning and leave a cup on her side of the partition, the way he listened when she talked about the mine's operations, taking her opinion seriously and implementing her suggestions, the way he would work alongside the crew during the day, his shirt soaked with sweat, muscles straining, but always found time to ask how she was doing, the way he defended her to townspeople who still whispered and stared. One evening, they sat on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. They'd had a good week. A new vein had opened up, richer than anything they'd found before. Clara was calculating profits in a ledger while Jed carved a piece of wood, his hands moving with surprising delicacy for their size. "We're going to be rich," Clara said, almost disbelieving. "Actually, genuinely rich. Your father's legacy." Jed didn't look up from his carving. "He'd be proud of you." "Proud of us," Clara corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you. The mine would have collapsed or been stolen by now if you weren't here." Jed set down his carving. She saw it was a bird, delicate and detailed. "I haven't done anything special, just helped where I could." "You've done more than that." Clara closed the ledger and turned to face him. "Jed, I need to tell you something." He finally looked at her, those pale gray eyes steady and calm. "What is it?" "When we made our arrangement, You said it wasn't romantic, that we were partners, not lovers. And I agreed because I never thought someone like you could see someone like me as anything more than a business arrangement. Clara's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to continue. But I've fallen in love with you, and I understand if you don't feel the same way. I understand if this makes things awkward. But I needed to be honest, because lying to you would be worse than risking rejection. Jed was silent for so long that Clara began to regret her confession. Then he stood and walked to the edge of the porch, his back to her. I told you I didn't care about your size, he said finally. That wasn't entirely true. I do care about it, but not in the way you think. Clara felt her stomach drop. Here it comes, she thought, the polite rejection. Every time we go to town, Jed continued, I see how people look at you. I see the mockery, the contempt, the cruel laughter, and it makes me want to tear them apart with my bare hands. He turned to face her. Not because I pity you, but because they're too stupid to see what I see. A woman who's brilliant with numbers, who works harder than any man I've known, who has more courage in her little finger than most people have in their whole body. A woman who asked a stranger for help when she had no reason to think he'd say yes. A woman who makes me want to be better than I am. He crossed back to her, and Clara saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Vulnerability. I've been alone for 8 years because I thought I was better off that way. Thought people were trouble and solitude was safer. But these last months with you have shown me what I was missing. You've given me a home, Clara, not just this cabin or this mine, but a real home, a place where I belong. He knelt in front of her chair so they were eye level. I love you. I've loved you for months, but was too scared to say it. Scared you'd think I was taking advantage of our arrangement. Scared you'd feel obligated to return the feeling because of what I did for you. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You love me? Really? Really. Jed took her hands in his. Every stubborn, brilliant, beautiful inch of you. Clara leaned forward and kissed him. It was awkward at first. Both of them were out of practice. But they found their rhythm. Jed's hands came up to cup her face, gentle despite their strength, and Clara felt like she might float away from sheer happiness. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. Jed rested his forehead against hers. So, he said, do we take down that partition in the cabin? Clara laughed, actually laughed, the sound bright and free. I think we should. That night, they removed the partition together, transforming the divided space into a shared home. And when they finally lay down together in what had been Jed's side, the bed was bigger, Clara felt something she had never expected to feel, safe, loved, and exactly where she belonged. The mine continued to prosper. Within a year, they were the wealthiest couple in the county. They expanded operations, hired more workers, and treated everyone fairly. Clara became known as a shrewd businesswoman, and Jed's reputation shifted from dangerous loner to Clara's devoted husband. The townspeople who had mocked her now sought her favor, though Clara never forgot who had been cruel and who had been kind. Uncle Silas tried once more to challenge the mine's ownership, but his lawyer advised him the case was hopeless. He eventually left Arizona entirely bitter and defeated. Clara felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only relief that he could no longer threaten what she and Jed had built. On Clara's 19th birthday, they held a real wedding ceremony. Reverend Walsh presided, and this time The marriage was witnessed by genuine friends and loyal workers. Clara wore a beautiful dress, expensive and tailored specifically for her, and Jed wore a new suit that actually fit his massive frame. During the ceremony, as they exchanged vows they had written themselves, Clara looked into Jed's eyes and saw her entire future reflected there. A future neither of them could have imagined that desperate day in the Last Chance saloon. "I, Jed, take you, Clara, to be my wife," Jed said, his deep voice steady and sure, "not because of gold or inheritance or convenience, but because you are the bravest person I have ever known, because you make me laugh and challenge me to think differently, because when I look at you, I see home." Clara's vows were equally heartfelt. "I, Clara, take you, Jed, to be my husband, not because you rescued me, though you did, but because you saw me when everyone else looked away, because you believed in me when I barely believed in myself, because you taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about finding someone who sees your imperfections and loves you anyway." When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation erupted in applause. And when Jed kissed Clara, he lifted her off her feet, all of her, and spun her around while she laughed, and for that moment she was weightless. Years later, when people asked Clara how she and Jed had met, she would smile and say, "I asked him to be my husband for an hour, and he was foolish enough to say yes." And Jed would add, "Best hour of my life. Everything good that came after started right there." They would look at each other then, these two unlikely souls who had found each other in desperation and built something lasting from the wreckage of loneliness. And everyone who saw them together understood that real love had nothing to do with appearances or societal expectations. It had everything to do with seeing someone's true worth and having the courage to claim it. The lucky Catherine mine operated for another 40 years under their management. But its real treasure wasn't the gold they pulled from the earth. It was the life they built together, a partnership that began with a desperate bargain and transformed into the truest love either of them had ever known.